Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar in STARS project. My name is Marko Horvat, and for the next hour and a half, I will be your moderator. I'm connecting with you from ICLE European Secretariat office in Freiburg, Germany. We're very pleased that you have all joined us today. We have 22 attendees, out of which we have 7 STARS Uptake series that today will introduce themselves in a moment. So we have Cluj-Napoca, we have Oradea, Varna and Sofia, we have Warsaw, Budapest and Bratislava. Special thanks also to our colleagues in sister projects High Reach, Motive and Inclusion that also join us here today. We hope that you will really enjoy our first webinar and that you will learn something new about car sharing, and that this webinar will inspire you to look more closely into car sharing as a way to improve mobility in your cities. Just before we get started, I would like to get over some technical aspects of this webinar. You can connect using your computer, as I'm sure most of you did, but also there is a possibility to dial in using your phone. So if you would like to dial in, please select the dial in option in the audio panel, and all the necessary instructions will be displayed, after which you will enter the PIN code. In order to have a smooth participation in this event, all attendees are muted upon connecting into the webinar to reduce the background noise. You can only be unmuted by us. By raising your hand, you will let us know if you have a question or a comment, and we will reply either by unmuting you or through a written comment using the chat dialog. You can also use the chat dialog to ask questions regarding the technical issues if you're experiencing any, or during the presentations directly to the presenters, but I will come to this point in a moment. So let's do a quick check now, please. Please raise your hand if you can hear me. I will give you a moment. I see people raising hands. Almost everybody raised a hand. Okay, perfect. That means that you can actually hear me. And we will continue this webinar. Before I present our lineup for today, I would like to say that this webinar is being recorded, and that everybody will receive the recording after the webinar is over in your email directly. So our lineup for today is a variety of car sharing experts and partners in STARS project from different parts of Europe. In order of presenting today, we will first meet Johannes Rodenbach, who is Policy and Project Officer at Autodelen.net from Ghent, Belgium, and he will introduce their work on mapping car sharing across Europe. Following, you will meet Suzy Maurice. She is an innovation strategist at LGI Consulting located in Paris, France, and Suzy will tell us more about car sharing business models and impacts on the automotive industry. After Suzy, you will meet Cecilia Bergstad, who is Associate Professor at the Department of Psychology, University of Gothenburg. And Cecilia will share with us results on socioeconomic factors on different car-sharing category users. In the end, you will meet Marco Diana, who is Associate Professor of Transport Engineering and Planning at Politecnico di Torino in Italy. And he is also STARS Project Coordinator, who would like to share a couple of words with us in the end. Let me briefly introduce our agenda today. So it's split in 5 parts. After my brief introduction, we will ask kindly our Uptake series to say a couple of words about themselves, who they are, and briefly about mobility situation in their cities. Then in the next 3 slots, the structure will be a 15-minute presentation on a car sharing topic, followed right away 5 minutes with a question slot. So please, if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat actually the question dialogue, and then we will devote 5 minutes after the presentation in each slot to answering them. In the end also, when Marco Diana will say a couple of words, we will also take some questions. So we will try to make this experience, let's say, as dynamic as possible, so you don't have to remember the questions for the end. Before we get started with our uptake series, I would like to say a couple of words on the project itself. So what is STARS? STARS stands for Shared Mobility Opportunities and Challenges for European Cities, and it is a project being funded under Horizon 2020 program. The project started in October 2017 and will finish in 2020. It involves 9 partners with different backgrounds all across Europe. STARS project in its core aims to explore the diffusion of car sharing in Europe, its connections with technological and social innovation, as well as its impacts on other transport modes and on the automotive industry itself. We will also hear more details about the project from my colleagues, but now I would like to announce our 7 uptake series, and I would like to ask them to tell us something about themselves. So I will go around and unmute participants from different cities. First, I would like to ask Razvan. I will unmute you. In a second. Oh. Give me a second. I don't know why I can't unmute Razvan automatically, so I'll make Razvan a presenter. Razvan, can you hear us? Hello, Razvan. Hi, can you please unmute yourself at this point? Perhaps,
No,
okay. Perfect. Hey, perfect, okay. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Gyuru Razvan and I represent the municipality of Cluj-Napoca. I work in local development department and from City Hall, and I'm responsible to implement, to develop and implement the sustainable urban mobility plan. For our city, regarding car sharing, in Cluj-Napoca, only a private company offers 60 cars for car sharing. This is a good idea for drivers and city. This also because it's reducing the pressure on the main car parks and making the city more attractive to pedestrians. Also, the municipality of Cluj-Napoca have one pilot program regarding the attending the high school in central area of our city. Mainly the children from grade 0 to 4 are using closed circuit buses and or mini buses.
Hello, Razvan, can you hear us? You're back.
Right.
Yes. Now.
Hello.
Yes, you're back again.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I told you about the closed circuit buses and mini buses for primary school children's, who was launched in September 2018. And for them, it's closed circuit buses, only to bring them from home to school, mainly to take the parents bringing them to city center to school by cars. And also we have an European project, but for bike sharing also, who is implemented and every man from our city, and it's using, and it's very good for our
Thank
city
you very
also.
much.
Welcome.
Perfect. Very nice introduction from Cluj-Napoca. Now I would like to ask Barna Ciprian for a couple of words about Oradea.
Good morning. I represent the city of Oradea. I work, in fact, for the Transport Authority of the city of Oradea. In terms of mobility landscape, the level of the city of Oradea, the model split is the following. We have approximately 39%, which is represented by motorized transport, so individual motorized transport by cars, and 35% is represented by the public transport, and 25% by walking. In our case, the most sustainable transportation modes, of course, is represented by the public transport. And in this respect, we have several major investment projects that we are focused on, which are related to the modernizing of the public transport fleet, which are related to the extension of the tramway lines, but of course to the extension of the public transport service, the level of Oradea metropolitan area, which represent the organized functional urban area, and represents the first metropolitan area from Romania, which was constituted in 2005. So we would like, in the frame of STARS project, we would like to explore a model which is related to the development of a car sharing service based on the home-based approach, in order to, of course, to decrease the number of cars, especially taking into account that we experienced an important increase in number of cars from 2008 to 2018. We registered in the city of Oradea more than 40,000 cars. And the city did not experience a very important urban sprawl. This is why it is very important to adapt to the level of the city, the sustainable urban mobility approach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was a great overview of Oradea. Now I would like to ask our guest from Sofia. Let me see, Cvetan. We will give floor to Cvetan. Hi, Cvetan, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. So I'm Cvetan from Sofia Urban Mobility Center. This is a mobility transport agency, or more or less like transport authority, 100% owned by the municipality. We are responsible for the implementation and for the monitoring of the sustainable public transport in Sofia. Together with ICLEI, we also participate in different projects. The latest one is STARS Uptake, which is for scaling up of sustainable urban mobility plans. The situation in Sofia. Sofia is around 1.3 million people, and the population has been increasing in the latest years. So is the car ownership. Currently, the motorization rate in the city is more than 500 vehicles per 1,000 inhabitants, which is one of the highest motorization rates across Europe. We have checked also the model split in the latest years, and according to the latest surveys, there has been increase in the car share in the model split and decrease in the other sustainable modes. As for the car sharing, there is only one car sharing scheme, and it is being operated by a private company with around 300 electric cars. So in Sofia, Sofia Urban Mobility Center grants free parking in the central zones for electric cars, and thus this car sharing company is using their cars to offer the users no parking cost service, which is actually a free floating service, so anyone can leave whatever they want their car in the city center. The service started in October 2017 and it's been increasing with more than 35,000 registered users. And the plans for this company is to enlarge the zones where they operate and to propose even better service. So this is for Sofia.
Thank you very much. Quite advanced. I would like to go now and skip Varna because I'm not sure who is here from Varna. Perhaps no one yet joined the call. And also, I would like to skip and go to Warsaw right away. But also from Bratislava, I was not introduced to someone who is here to speak on behalf of Bratislava. So can someone who is here to speak on Bratislava send me a direct message here or raise a hand or send as a question so that I have your name, please? Thank you. So now I would like to continue with Warsaw. In this panel. Tamas, can you hear us?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, my name is Tamas Dombi. I'm representing Warsaw Public Road Authority. In short, we are dealing with car sharing like since 5 years, and we had an enormous development in this field in the past few years. Now we have around 2,000 vehicles of 5 operators, including a German company Innogy that introduced an electric car sharing of 500 vehicles just last week, right on Friday. And a Polish company, Panek, having more than 1,000 cars around Warsaw, currently 1,100. And besides them, we have 2 other smaller operators with 300 cars each, and the Lithuanian company CTB with currently only vans to rent. So that's the car sharing scene now in Warsaw, and we are, as the public authority, part of the city administration. We are looking for ways to support car sharing. Our goal is to deal with the high motorization rate, because in Warsaw there are even more than in Sofia, like 650 vehicles per 1,000 inhabitants. So that's a lot. On the other hand, we have a very high percentage of public transport users. Most people use public transport in everyday trips, and the cycling figures are growing as well. We have a city-owned bike sharing scheme of 5,000 bikes. So probably all figures are showing that people are owning cars, but they don't use it every day, just a few times a week. And we see here a big opportunity for car sharing to lower the motorization rate. So that's short for Warsaw. Thank you for the webinar, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Happy to have Warsaw on board as well, and looking forward to learning stuff from Warsaw and from other cities. Lastly, I would like to go to Budapest now. We have Patrick with us, and then we will see in the end if we have someone from Varna and Bratislava in the end. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Marco. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm representing BKK Center for Budapest Transport. BKK is the integrated responsible mobility manager of the city of Budapest. The company belongs to the municipality of Budapest. A few words about the situation of car sharing. The first car sharing company which appeared in Budapest was Ringo. They started to operate in November 2016, so 2.5 years ago. They started with 45 vehicles, only electric vehicles, and now they have 300 vehicles. They are a small private company. And in January 2018, so a bit more than a year ago, a second company appeared. It's MOL, which is the biggest oil company in Hungary. They are the branding sponsor of the Bubi, which is the public bike sharing scheme in Budapest. And they are operating with 450 vehicles, and 1/3 of the vehicles is electric. And just another interesting point, BKK is participating in several Horizon 2020 research and development projects, and in one of our projects, in Cities for People, we are going to pilot a mobility point in the downtown of Budapest, and both car sharing companies will participate in the mobility point with vehicles. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to hearing more about this as well throughout the project. So far, these are all the cities that connected here today. Just before moving on, I have to say that all of these cities here are very, very active and very involved in different mobility projects that also ICLE is involved in. So big thanks to all these cities to always be available and to have energy to spare to learn more things and to improve their cities for their citizens. Thank you. I will now hand over the presentation to my colleague Johannes. Johannes, I'll give you the microphone. Hi Johannes, I cannot hear you. Still, I cannot hear you. Can you see if you're maybe muted on your microphone?
Okay, hi, Marco, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, something went wrong with connection, I suppose.
Oh, okay. Now I can hear you and I can see your screen.
Okay, I hope...
You can also turn on your camera, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I won't do that because that will be worse for the connection, I think. So
okay. Okay.
So you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hi everybody, my name is Johannes. I work for Automotive.net. We are a Belgian partner from the STARS consortium. This is a bit of an explanation of what we are doing. So we are a not-for-profit network for car sharing. So we don't offer car sharing ourselves, but we are bringing together both the providers of car sharing in Belgium and Flanders, and also the private car sharing groups. So yeah, bring together and do projects with them. We have a lot of contact with local governments on the teams of car sharing. So that's a bit of what we are doing. I would like to tell you something more about the first technical work package we done in the STARS project. And I will present you some results of descriptive analysis. And this research was on, we would like to see some typologies of car sharing in Europe. So we would like to know, which car sharing schemes are active in Europe, and how can we bring them together in some kind of typology. And then we did it via desktop research, so from our own computer desktops, and look for as much information on car sharing in Europe as possible. And then we also send out an in-depth survey to several car sharing operators in Europe. And then I will end with some challenges for car sharing that we knew from the car sharing operators and also from the cities. So to start with an overview, during our desktop research, we found out almost 200 cases, so almost 200 car sharing operators in Europe. I have to mention that we did this research in the end of 2017. I guess if we would do it nowadays, we will find some extra operators and some extra systems. So the world of car sharing is evolving very, very quickly. So, but yeah, it has been done in the end of 2017, and we found car sharing operators in 25 countries of the EU. Then the in-depth survey, online survey, we send it out to all car sharing operators that were active in 20 cities in Europe. So here you can see the list of cities spread along 12 countries, and we got answers from 56 operators. So we have a good view on how they operate on a couple of characteristics, but I will come back to these numbers in a couple of minutes. So you can see we have a nice spread among Europe, maybe not that much in Eastern Europe, but I will tell you something about that also in a couple of minutes. So what we found is that there are basically 3 different types of business models in car sharing. So we have car sharing providers that own their own fleet and provide them to their customers. So you see an example here of Drive Now and Car2Go above. And the second business model is peer-to-peer car sharing. So people that share cars, private cars among each other. Here you see an example of Drivey, a French peer-to-peer car sharing platform. And the last one is sharing cars among neighbors. That's something that we only have seen in Belgium and in the Netherlands. It's a bit comparable to peer-to-peer car sharing, but we see that people make what we call car sharing groups, and people share their cars quite often among each other, among neighbors, among friends. And it's a bit different to the peer-to-peer because also the pricing model is a bit different. Then we also look to some operational characteristics, and then we can divide car sharing systems with an own fleet. We can divide them in 4 different schemes or 4 different types of car sharing. On the left hand, you see both round trip systems, round trip station based and round trip home zone based. And on the right hand side, you see 2 types of free floating car sharing. So I will show you some examples. So basically, round trip station based car sharing is that the vehicles are located in reserved parking spaces, and clients can pick them up and return them after their journey to the same located or to the same reserved parking space. And when people reserve the car, they have to specify when they will come back with the car. So you have to specify the start and finish time. Then on round trip home zone based, there's a variant of the station based round trip car sharing system. However, the vehicles are not made available in select parking spaces. Instead, the vehicles are parked anywhere within a narrow geographical area, usually a neighborhood or a parking space management zone. And then if we go to the right-hand side, to the free-floating systems, then we see in the right lower corner, the free-floating car sharing with operational area. And I heard from the uptake cities that they have quite some experience with that type of car sharing. So the vehicles are located within a defined operational area, and so they are distributed freely throughout this whole operational area. And you don't have to give up an end time when you book a car. You don't have to bring the car back to the same place where you found it, so you have a lot of flexibility in that system. And then the free floating with pool stations is a bit comparable, but you can go with a car from one way to the other way of the city, but you have to park it in a specified zone for these type of cars. So we have special pool stations for that type of cars. So that's a bit of an overview of the operational characteristics we found in Europe among car sharing systems. I showed you an example of free floating. In the right, free floating with operational area, you see Car2Go, which is funded by Mercedes, and then Drive Now is funded by BMW. And a couple of months ago, they made a new platform together, which is called Share Now. So they are bringing together their their systems in one overarching system. So that's an interesting development we are seeing now in car sharing world. Then we also have the systems that enable people to share their private cars. So I talked about the system to share cars among neighbors. We see at this moment only in Belgium and the Netherlands. And then we have also some examples of peer-to-peer car sharing. And the biggest difference between both systems is the way the pricing model, and the left-hand examples and the systems, the price is based on the real cost of the car. And as you use a car, you only pay the real cost of the car. And then on the right-hand side, on the peer-to-peer car sharing, an owner of the car can set his own price, and you can make a business out of it if you want to. So you see some examples. Drivey is one of the biggest snap cars, also quite a big player in Europe. So that's a bit of an overview. Then to further analyze all the results, we came from 3 business models and 4 operational characteristic types. We brought them together to have 5 categories of car sharing. That's not that important, but it's more for us. We did this to get a more overview during the analysis. But you see some, that most of the operational characteristics are also, you can find them also in the categories of car sharing. So I will move on to the first results. So this is an overview of how many categories of car sharing we found, and how many systems that fall under these different types of categories. And then you see that most of these systems in Europe, or a majority, works on a round trip based system. So more than half. And then the free floating systems represents almost 1/3 of the schemes in Europe. And then we see 14% for peer-to-peer. So altogether, we had almost 200 cases. So that's a bit of an overview of the division of systems. There were also a couple of systems that provide more than one type of characteristics to their customers. So I have here 2 examples, like Cambio. Most of the times they offer round-trip station-based systems, but in a couple of cities they also have round-trip home zone-based systems. So they combine in several cities these type of car sharing. And from Zipcar we saw the same. So that's an interesting thing to see, and we expect that more car sharing platforms will do that way, become more hybrid systems of car sharing. So if we look a bit at the history, we see 1 out of 4 car sharing operators began before the year 2000, so that's already a long time ago. And then we see also that 4 out of 10 systems started after 2013. So we see a bit of a division between long-lasting systems and relatively quite new operators. And that's interesting to see that the last years we see a lot of new operators starting also in new parts of Europe where the year before we don't see any activity. And we made the comparison here between different regions in Europe, and then we see in Western and Northern Europe there was the earliest activity based on car sharing, and in Southern and Eastern Europe systems began later. And we see, like for instance, in Eastern Europe, the average starting year from car sharing operators is the year of 2015, not that long ago. So that's also why we didn't found that many car sharing operators in Eastern Europe, but I think if you do it, we will do research again now, and within a couple of years, that will be a lot of more than 2 years ago. Can we see some differences? So this is how many cases we found in each region of Europe. So most of them were based in Western Europe, almost 60%, and then 15 in Northern Europe, 18 in Southern, and the least 8% in Eastern Europe. And then we also looked at which operational characteristics we found the most in these different types of Europe, in different regions. Now we see for Eastern Europe more free-floating systems and round-trip. And I think when I saw the letters of intent of the uptake cities, and also what you have been saying in the beginning of the presentation, I heard a lot of examples of free-floating car sharing operators. So I think that matches with the research that we did, that a lot that more free-floating than round-trip systems are active in Eastern Europe. For Southern, it's a little bit the same, also more free-floating with operational area systems. Northern Europe, we have a lot of examples of peer-to-peer car sharing, or more than average. And in Western Europe, more than average round-trip based car sharing services than in the rest of Europe. And since we have a lot of Eastern Europe cities here during the webinar, I made a more detailed table of the situation in Eastern Europe. And so we see that, majority of the systems is free-floating, like I said, and then 35% round-trip, and almost 1/5 is peer-to-peer. And when we compare it with the average European Union numbers, we see, what I said before, so less round-trip, more than average free-floating, and peer-to-peer is a little bit more than the average in European Union. So that it's certainly interesting to see that development in Eastern Europe is a bit different than the average, or than what we see in Western Europe. Okay, we also looked at some characteristics of how cars can be reserved, how can cars be opened. So some general numbers. So we see almost 80% of all car sharing services offer a website or an application to reserve a car. Some of them also have a phone or a call center, and even we found five operators that have a physical customer service when people can come in and book a car, but it's quite rare. And then to open a car, most of them offer a chip card, when you can open the car and start driving. So almost 60%. Almost half also offer a mobile application to open the car, and then some of them also use the physical key swap. That's more, we see that most of the times in systems that from peer-to-peer car sharing or car sharing among neighbors, where the technical support is less advanced, but we see that the people swap their physical keys with each other. Okay, then let's switch to one specific system, so the opening technology with an application, and it's interesting to see how it differs among the different car sharing categories. So we see that 90% of all free-floating operational area systems offer an application to open the car, but on the other hand, less than 10% of the peer-to-peer operators offer this technology. So that's a big difference. Like I said, in peer-to-peer, we see more the key that it's physically swapped. So systems with also the system of round-trip home zone based offers a lot of times an app to open the car, and so we can conclude that systems with fixed parking spaces opt less for this technology than the other systems. So if you have a flexible system that offers flexible parking policy, then you almost need an application to open the car. So we see that in this numbers also. They are here in the circles. Then we made a comparison between the pricing models, and then we see for example, for the free-floating operational area systems, that almost all of them, 95%, take into account the time for their pricing model to customers, and only 48% also take into account distance. So the time aspect is very important here for the free-floating operational area systems. And when we switch to round-trip station-based, then we see that the combined option, or the combination of both time and distance, is very important here. It's interesting to see that the free-floating is more based on how long you drive the car, and in round-trip, it's both the time and the distance that is important to make a price for your trip. Then we can switch also to we ask them how long is the average distance that it's traveled with your type of cars. And then when we ask it to the free-floating with operational area systems, and we see that Yeah, 90% of the trips are less than 10 kilometers. So these cars, these types of cars, are used for quite small trips. Most of them within the inner city, because we see that if those type of car sharing systems are active in the larger cities of Europe. So less than 10 kilometers is inner city trips. And then for the round trip station based systems, we see a whole different picture. Almost 50% of the trips that are done with a station based system are trips that are more than 50 kilometers. So it's interesting to see how these types differ among each other. And for peer-to-peer, we didn't have that much respondents from peer-to-peer car sharing operators, but they all said that their trips are average more than 50 kilometers and used for sometimes a couple of days on each other. Okay, so that's for the overview of the research we did from this first part. And then we also asked both city administrations and car sharing operators how they see the future for car sharing, what challenges, what barriers do they see for car sharing, but also which policy actions are taken by the cities. And so the majority of the cities we interviewed, they grant free access to car sharing operators, access to the paid parking zones. So that's a nice advantage for car sharing operators and also for the customers of these operators. But then we also saw that not a lot of cities are willing to give car sharing organizations free access to limited traffic zones. So that's maybe a bridge too far, and they don't want, they neither want shared cars in their limited traffic zones. So that's one thing that came out of the research. And then maybe a last point, and we asked the car sharing systems which main barriers they see for the further evolvement or the evolution of car sharing in the coming years and decades. And one of the main points was the parking regulations. So we heard, some cities grant free access or free access to paid parking places, but they see it's not in all cities. And the operators say it's very important for us that we make good arrangements around these parking regulations, that our customers know what they can do. If we are operating a station-based system, that we need some fixed parking places, because that is how the system works. So a lot of operators pointed out to that parking regulation. So I think it's, as a city, it's important to have good contact with the operators and have a good talk with them and make some arrangements on that point. Some other things, but maybe I can be a bit short about it. We also use this information to make our policy brief, some policy recommendations from STARS that we are spreading now. So this information was very useful for us. But car sharing operators are pointing to company cars as a bit of a threat for their systems. Also tax regulations. They truly believe in an overlap between car sharing and public transport. Is there good synergies between them that can be very interesting for both systems? Practice what you preach. As a city or as a government, you can also use car sharing for your trips, for your administration trips. So that can be a good example to show to the citizens that you really truly believe in car sharing. Some cities give funding for electric vehicles. That can be an interesting idea. And then we also made some a list of some pull and push measures to favor sustainable modes of transport and so on. So I think these are the main results of what came out of work package 2 and mainly task 2.1. So if there are any questions, please, I would be good to answer them.
Thank you, Johannes. Very good, very precise, very detailed presentation. I hope it was very useful for all our cities and our guests in this webinar. As you said, the policy brief, I also included in here in the webinar. If our attendees go to the handouts part, which is on their panel in dashboard attendees, polls, questions, and then there's a handout. They can download the policy brief. It's a 4-page, nicely laid out document, so it's worth having a look. Going to questions, we had 2 questions during your presentation.
Okay.
So first of all, maybe I can address Sasha Deutsch question. Hi, will the slides be shared later on? Yes, the entire webinar is recorded. So recording will be shared and the slides will be available through the email. So every participant will receive the email. And do you know about any comparative study on car sharing in Central East European countries? There is a lot of happening recently here by Thomas from Warsaw. So this maybe was partially answered, but maybe Johannes, you maybe can say something else on the comparative study, and maybe on the future steps that you're planning to do.
Yes, I think in the years before the STARS research, I think the report of the MOMO project, so MOMO, was a very interesting project. They did a comparative study among Europe in 2009. I'm not sure if Central and Eastern European cities were involved. I'm not sure, but it's a good overview of what car sharing was at that time. So with the STARS project, we tried to get an update of that research. Our full report of 2.1 task from STARS will be available, I think, very soon. So yeah, when it's available for public, you will find it on our STARS website, and there you can have a nice overview of all activities in European cities, also in Central and Eastern Europe.
Great. Thank you, Johannes. I also have to mention that Central East European cities and countries are of special interest to the project as well. And this is why we're trying to engage in knowledge transfer as much as possible and also get good examples from these countries, as we have heard today. Thank you very much, Johannes. These are all the questions that were written during your presentation.
Maybe I could say one word?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, about the last slide, I forget one. So in October 8th this year, we organized for the second time Shared Mobility Rocks. So an event on shared mobility, a bit different than the usual events, a bit more, rock. So if any people are interested to come over, it's in Brussels. It will be an international event on shared mobility. So please are all very welcome to join us in October.
Is there any rock music in there?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Johannes.
You're welcome.
These were all the questions, and now I would like to move on and give the floor to Susie, who will present more about car sharing business models. So let me find Susie. Susie, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes. Can you hear
perfect.
me?
Yes, very good.
Great. Good morning, everyone.
On the camera, sorry, if you want.
I'm going to keep it off just for connection purposes, in case it has been a bit off for a bit. So today I'm going to present an analysis of business models for car sharing services across Europe. I will say that I was very happy to see how interested you all are in car sharing. Different cities expressed interest in different business models, and I think that just goes to show that there's not one model which is better than the others. It really depends on a city's characteristics and even individual drivers' preferences. So with that, I hope that this presentation can shed some light on what some of those characteristics are and maybe how they can help you make decisions for your specific circumstances. Okay. Very quickly, we are going to discuss 5 car sharing business models. So it's a bit different from what Johannes presented in terms of the classification. More or less what we are using as a business model is what he presented as a category. No major differences though. I'll also discuss some of the operational characteristics that he presented, but I'm going to focus on how these have an impact on the business models. I'll then map the business models based on a few factors from the user's perspectives, share some of the key trends among car sharing companies, and then if there's time, I'll discuss a few of the strategies of the automotive industry, partly in response to car sharing. Okay, so for this task, we analyzed the market based on desktop research, interviews with car sharing companies, a survey with answers from about 60 different car sharing organizations operating across Europe, and an assessment of Osterwalder's business model canvas for 15 organizations. And we identified the 5 car sharing business models as free-floating with operational area, free-floating with pull stations, round-trip home zone-based, round-trip station-based, and peer-to-peer, or what we like to call P2p, as Johannes presented. This is not all, technically. There's the combined car sharing business model, for example, which combines a few of these operational characteristics together. However, we are focusing on the main business models that we found to be operating in Europe today. It's also worth noting that the 2 newest business models on the block, so to speak, are free-floating with pull stations, which so far seems to be an electric-only model, and P2p. However, a lot is really evolving in this field right now, and since we've done this study, Automotive, which is the iconic leader of the free-floating with pull stations business model, it has gone out of business. So it's a market that is evolving very quickly. For some of the operational characteristics that we found and how they impact the business models. So free-floating is going from point A to point B, but what this does is it enables one-way trips, but it potentially cuts drivers' journey times and therefore rental costs also in half. It is ideal for compact urban areas, so they usually offer smaller cars, and it also means that they cater to shorter trips. So they charge based on the time traveled rather than the distance traveled, as indeed traffic is a major feature of urban areas. We also found that they charged mainly based on minutes instead of hours. Socio-demographic data for free-floating business models shows that they tend to attract younger members, and by this we mean an average age of 33 years old. And roughly 70% of the drivers are male. 17% of the overall membership lives in a household with kids, and the attitude is that driving a car is fun. It's almost the cool thing to do. Round-trip business models, on the other hand, now they're more traditional, but meaning that they require you to return the car to the zone or station from which they started. And for this reason, they are less flexible than their counterparts. I'll come back to this later on. They tend to have longer on average booking times lasting for several hours or a day, and they cater to longer trips. So it's really for users who want to take the car out of the city to visit the surrounding rural areas, for example. Socio-demographic data suggests that they tend to attract slightly older members, and by slightly older I mean 44 years old. That's the average. There's a more equal split along gender lines, so 56% of them roughly are male. 35% live in a household with kids, and the attitude towards a car is very different. It's that a car is a means to an end, so it's more of a necessity to have this membership. Area zone-based business models and station-based. Okay, so area zone-based business models, of course, give users the option to park anywhere within a zone. Drivers can potentially save time this way, and theoretically they are able to park closer to their final destination than a station might otherwise permit. However, this is a big however, it is all dependent upon whether or not there are city parking spaces actually available in the first place. Otherwise, drivers may spend their time and consequently their money searching for an open space. This is not considered a major debilitating factor. However, it's just something to keep in mind. And it really depends on the custom itinerary of the driver, such as the particular location he or she is in, the particular hours or time of day that the car is being used, and so on. Also, I will say that many organizations are using technology these days to offer drivers help in finding parking spaces to get around such issues. From a supply side perspective, this operational characteristic also means that the organizations do not have to rent city space for pull stations. However, some of them may spend money instead on moving the cars that get parked outside of the indicated zones. Likewise, if all of the cars in the zone tend to be parked in one specific area, then the organizations may have to move the cars around within the zone so as to just keep them visible and equidistant. For station-based, they have to be picked up and parked at a station, of course. This tends to be a more reliable service from the driver's perspective, as the customers know where exactly to find the cars. However, there is somewhat less flexibility, as the stations may be far from where the drivers want to go. So that means they have to have extra travel time and or a multimodal trip. Likewise, if these stations are full, drivers will have to return their car to another station that's further away. So drivers either hope to find a spot at the closest station, or they must reserve one on a platform in advance. So again, this is where technology is coming in and making this easier on the drivers. Last but not least are the P2p organizations, and these allow car owners to make money, so to speak, by renting out their own cars. When drivers are done with the car, they return it by taking it back to the home or home zone area. So where it goes really depends on if it's operating in a big city, as there may not be private parking spaces available, and they have to park it on public parking, or if it's in a suburb. The flexibility that it allows members, the options that it allows members, theoretically, there are more options, but then at the same time, it really just depends on what is available and when. I will say that something I missed, it looks much like a round trip business model, but don't be fooled. The value proposition, the customer segments, the key features of these organizations, they all result in a very different business model. And each car owner brings his or her own car and personality to the group. And so actually within the P2P business model, each P2P organization can perform very differently from the others. Okay, so these tend to be for the longest trips distance-wise, and just to give you an example, Drivey, which is a P2P organization, it considers daily car rental companies its biggest competitor, particularly when it comes to tourists and young people. And so it focuses on trips lasting an average of 2 days, just because ride-hailing services such as Uber are so much more convenient than signing up for a car-sharing service. And indeed, if you look at the French Drivey website, they have pricing for up to 1 month. And one of the downsides with this is that they typically require a physical key to open the cars, meaning that the drivers have to meet the car owner often, and this can be time-consuming and maybe less flexible. A lot of the organizations in the beginning, this was a selling point, the social community aspect, but I think due to the evolution of the organization's popularity, this has changed, and so now some of the P2P organizations are offering technology platforms such as chip cards or mobile access to bypass this step. And from a supply side perspective, the business model alleviates upfront cost. So this really enables lower density communities such as suburbs and smaller towns to partake in car sharing as well. Okay, so based on these business model characteristics, we've mapped them based on distance traveled on the vertical axis. That's how far drivers can theoretically go, as well as how far the average driver travels, and also the flexibility on the horizontal axis. We define flexibility by having greater options, be it car model choices, time for car rental, or potential parking spaces, what have you. But this will ultimately depend, as mentioned, on a driver's individual circumstances and the specific features of an organization. What makes an organization or a business model attractive is also not limited to these two factors, but these are some of the most important that we found. So it's interesting to see how they rank against each other. Okay, so we studied 15 organizations using Osterwalder's business model canvas. We took anywhere from 2 to 4 organizations for each business model category, and then we completed a business model canvas for each one. I'm going to break down some of the patterns we saw from that analysis and their survey answers. I won't have time to go through all of them, but they will be on the recording for you to go through if you would like. Something to note from these 4 slides, it can get quite busy, but what the charts show is which business models have more competition in certain areas. But something that's also quite telling is to look at which organizations are not up there. So the gaps can also point to key information. For this one, I'm going to focus on key partners of local governments. It's proving to be crucial for success regardless of the business model. And this can come in the form of electrification of station bays, tax reduction, free public parking of some sort, and so on. There were only 2 organizations that we looked at that did not partner with local governments, and some were in the process of doing that. Another one I want to point out is partnering with original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs. Based on the 15 that we looked at, this happens where the market is most competitive or in already established companies. Some may choose to focus on a partnership with a car rental company instead, but what happens, or at least with the 15 that we saw, is that these companies will end up getting bought out by an OEM anyway. Even for the P2p organizations, we saw that OEM partnerships were emerging as an aspect. Car Amigo now has a partnership with Ford, where Ford will encourage its car buyers to join the Car Amigo car sharing group. All right, so electric vehicles, those are increasingly popular, though they may or may not be profitable. They account for 100% of the fleet, of course, for the organizations that are free-floating pull station, as well as for Par2Go. As city restrictions restrict air pollution are becoming more common, offering an electric car is a growing part of the business model for the car-sharing organizations that we studied. However, it's still not a defining feature of most, just because it's very expensive to build station bays. For the revenue structure, most business models are for-profit in nature, including some of the cooperatives. The 2 organizations that did not have a for-profit structure, they focused on social and environmental aspects in addition to car sharing, so there was a triple bottom line. Subscription fees and deposits, these range. It's common to offer members packages of subscription fees where they get to choose what they want, and to allow branch owners to choose whether or not their members will pay a subscription fee at all. The same goes for a deposit, though we saw lots of variances here. So some would charge anything from 15 euros, others charge 500 euros. Credit card numbers were also becoming an option that was appearing more frequently on the scene. Okay, and last but not least, we have pricing. Most organizations, as you can see, price by time. All but the free-floating pull stations, which do not use gasoline, price by distance. And then for fuel cost, only a few charge extra for that. For most, it is bundled into the membership cost. And then this is, I think it just goes without saying that car sharing is changing the automotive industry in a number of ways. Vehicle manufacturers are having to adapt. Leading companies are starting to develop strategies that transition from vehicle ownership to, say, vehicle usership. Car sharing is obviously one of these, but what we're seeing is also that various innovations are also pushing the car sharing market forward at the same time. So CASE, Connected Autonomous Shared Service and Electric, is Daimler's strategy, but this is just one example of what they are doing, and for them the whole idea is to avoid commodification of the car. So in other words, keeping the car from losing brand status. Okay, and that is all I have. I am happy to answer any questions we have in the remaining time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susie. This was very condensed information on car sharing. I'm sure it's not easy to find all of this just laying around somewhere and read it straight from internet, especially from the supply side. This information is usually quite inaccessible, and I'm sure that whoever is interested can go and read these slides again and go over the webinar again just to refresh their memory. And I also find out that very interesting information as a potential user you can find here. So how, in what way they are pricing. There was no questions entered, so.
Great. Hopefully it was all clear.
It was all clear, definitely. Let me see, there is a raised hand. Or it's, nope, it's a false alarm. Okay, anyways, if there will be any questions, still if participants think of some questions, they are very welcome to enter, and we will have in the end some time for questions. But now I would like to proceed, and I would like to give floor to Cecilia, who will present on the user perspective and on the socioeconomic factors of different car sharing users. So, Cecilia, the floor is yours. I cannot hear you. Can you hear me, Cecilia? Okay, we can see the screen. Perhaps you are still muted. Still, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you still. Can you?
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Hello? Okay, sorry. I will also share my webcam, I think. But I want to see my presentation myself. Okay, there. Okay, so I will talk about, I think I actually slightly changed my title. I'm sorry for that. And I will start the time. So I will talk about socioeconomic factors and mobility styles of car sharing users. And I am, as I was presented before, I'm associate professor at Department of Psychology. I've been working with transport psychology or transport related issues in STARS, but also before in my research. And I am particularly interested in the behavior change regarding transport modes. I'm not sure how Okay, so, and I represented work package 4 in this project about the underlying factors and behavior change determinants. And as a psychologist, I work from, well, a social science perspective mostly. And in this work package, we had 3 main tasks. And the first one was named the influence of socioeconomic factors in the diffusion of car sharing. And then we have mobility cultures and mobility styles. And the last task was regarding overall assessment for the drivers of behavior change. And in this work package, most of the partners have been involved actually in one way or another. And in the first task, we started with an overview of what was already done in Europe. And the previous speaker has talked about some aspects of these already, but we found regarding gender, when comparing the different national surveys that we have found, that there is a variation. For instance, the share of female versus male is different in England, Scotland, compared, for instance, to France or to Germany and Italy and the Netherlands. We have also some surveys that we compared, and we also compared it to the share of driving license holders in the different countries to see how it differs. But overall, there is a male dominance among the car sharers, but it varies between nations and also between, of course, the car sharing variants, as we heard before. And this is an overview of the age profiles. We heard that, for instance, and here it varies if it's round trip, station-based members or free-floating members in this chart. But we can also see that the distribution of ages varies from country to country. But we can also confirm that free-floating members, for instance, in Germany, are dominated by the younger age groups compared to the older ones. Well, I will not go through all these numbers, and I will refer to our report that will be public quite soon for looking into the details here. So it's just to show you some examples. And we also had a case study in Germany, and it was 5 different operators who took part in this case study: Cambio, Startmobil, Car2Go, Book and Drive, and Drivey. And here is, well, the average age and percentage of men. And overall, we have an average age of 46 and 56% of male users. But when we see the different combinations of services that these users have, we can see there is quite a lot of variance, and we see the combined, or let me see it, the combined and the free-floating members, they have the largest share of male, and the combined is Book and Drive, actually, which has a car sharing variant that offers both round-trip station-based and free-floating with operational areas and pull stations to their users, and it's in Frankfurt. So that was just some example from this case study, and the other example I want to show you is just to see. Here's a comparison between round-trip, free-floating, combined, and peer-to-peer. And the free-floating users, they stand out in a couple of ways. As we heard before, not many children in the households, but we also have 2 groups, subgroups among the users. We have the well-paid employees, and we also have students in this group. And there is a low percentage compared to other groups of car-free households, 32%. And as we heard before, attitudes towards a car is more fun rather than means to an end, which we can find for the round trip and the combined, but also peer-to-peer had more fun or had this attitude. The use of car sharing, it's used for shorter, as we heard also before, maybe shorter inner city trips and more convenience rides. And we had quite higher frequency of use compared to the others. And sorry about that. And this is, the car sharing is like an addition to a private car. They still own private cars. And we also see in this case study, they expressed dissatisfaction with the availability of vehicles. They experienced this as low, and this was not experienced in the other groups. And within Work Package 4, we had an online questionnaire that we distributed to both users and non-users in Europe, and we had most of the respondents were from Italy and Sweden, and we have about 97% of the respondents were from these countries, and in total we have 1,500 users who responded to this survey. And we used the survey for making lots of analysis. Let's see, and some of the analyses were creating groups of respondents by means of cluster analysis, and we found among the users we clustered them regarding their mobility patterns and the attitudes, and we found 3 different styles, mobility styles, and we named them the mobility style 1. We named multimodal, ambivalent, and this group they use almost frequently, and they have the lowest level of environmental awareness. And the mobility style 2 we named car focus green, and they have still have a frequent use of a private car, but also high environmental awareness. And mobility style 3, they use active modes like walking and cycling to a high extent compared to the other groups, and they have also the most positive attitude towards car sharing. Now I will show you some more comparisons between these mobility styles. So here we have mobility style 1, 2, and 3 regarding on the left it's number of users, total number of users in the groups, and we can see that the mobility style 3 is the most common style, and in this group the number of male users is about half, and in the other groups the male users are consist a larger share than half of the users. The gray is showing how many of the users that don't have a car. So we see in mobility style 3 we have a majority who has no own private car, while in mobility style 2 and 1 these groups are much smaller. And then we have the mobility styles and how they are distributed regarding private cars and car sharing and other modes. So mobility style 1 and 2 also uses the private car to quite a high extent, but they also use the car sharing and the active modes and public transport to quite high extent, I would say, while mobility style 3 have a very low share of private car use. They also use car sharing to a smaller extent, and the active modes and public transport to the larger extent. Let's see, we change, move down. No. Okay, and the mobility styles and countries, we can see that for the percentage here on the left, and the blue and the red are Italy and Sweden, and the gray are other countries, and the other countries are only found in in mobility style 3, and I shall say that the other countries were Germany, France, the Netherlands, and Spain were the countries that we reached out to. And we can see that in mobility style 2, it's a large majority of the Italian users, the Italian and very few of the Swedish ones, while mobility style 1 is about equally many Italian and Swedish ones. And we can also see the different types of operators, the free floating with pool station and the station-based, round-trip station-based are the green. And we have most of the station-based round-trip in mobility style 3, and most of the free-floating in mobility style 2. But also the free-floating pool station is quite common in mobility style 3. And more detailed about the I think I missed one of my figures. Sorry, it's the same twice, isn't it? Okay, sorry about that. I was about to talk more about the attitudes actually in this one, but I will change that when I upload my presentation later on. I just want to my last few minutes I will comment on this this model that we also had in our project, and we used the data from the questionnaire to assess this. And these are all the psychological factors that we measured, and the observed variables are actually the socio-economic variables and the variables concerning the city and availability of vehicles, etc. And we are trying to here predict the behavior change or the intention to use car sharing, and we found that the strongest influence was from behavior, perceived behavior control, that people perceive this behavior to be easy and accessible, and that they understand how to use the services. And the biggest obstacle was a strong habit of car use, or car-based use, and the facilitators were users of active modes on public transport and a more strong habit of these. But also the norms and the attitudes influence the behavior intention. So I will just wrap up with some conclusions, and there are many more, of course, in our reports, but we found strong indication of a variation of demands and preferences depending on service use and the mobility styles, and the contextual differences, the nation's cities, availability of services are very large and may also influence the preferences, and we are not sure about the causal relationships here. And the majority of car sharing users in our study still relies on the private car quite a lot, and the strong car use habits, they are a barrier for behavior change also. Okay, I think that's all I have time for. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, very much for this very valuable knowledge generated. There was a lot of work put into these slides, not only these slides, but also slides before, and to make it understandable. And as you invited all the attendees, please feel free to go to our webpage and read further reports, and always come back to us if you have questions. Thank you, Cecilia. We have one question which we can address now. It was not directly for Cecilia necessarily. Let me see where it was. Maybe it was still referred to presentation before from Susie, and it was from Beate saying, "I missed the company move about when talking about e-cars. Is there a reason for that?" So perhaps Johannes or Susie or Cecilia, whoever maybe knows an answer to that, can unmute themselves.
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I can say straight away. Yeah.
I know from our perspective, we just picked some of the car sharing companies that we felt could embody the greatest characteristics. So that was just not one that we chose. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the answer. I would like to now give a couple of final minutes. We are very much on time now, and to Marco Diana, who is our project coordinator, to say a couple of words.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you everybody for having participated into this questionnaire. So we are running out of time. I don't want to take you much more time, also because we had a quite interesting presentation. I wanted just to point out that, as you might have noticed, that we are about halfway in our project. So we are in that phase in which we are collecting a lot of information. I think this is maybe the first impression that you had while assisting at those three presentations. So we have a lot of information on several different perspectives of car sharing, from a business model viewpoint, on the viewpoint of social psychology, and so on. But I would just simply like to say that perhaps the most interesting part of our job for you, the cities, so the people that really need to take decisions for the cities, is the most interesting part is coming right now, in which we are trying to put together all the information that you have seen in those slides, and much more that will be available in our reports, put together and try to process it and try to give some indication for local authorities. And this will be the last part in our project. And the key question that we want to answer using this knowledge is really to understand to which extent car sharing can contribute in building a more sustainable transport systems in your cities. And clearly the quick question is that is car sharing successful in substituting private trips done by the cars? Or perhaps there are problems because there are some substitution effects with public transport or active means, because we must be really concerned on that. We are trying to have some look with this issue right now in those months. And perhaps the most important thing that I would like to mention, so it's perhaps the most important takeaway for this morning, is that there is not just one car sharing model. Okay, we have seen across all presentations, and this is really one of the key objectives of our project, that there are several different car sharing operational models, systems, and variants, and perhaps, like Cecilia mentioned, different models have different goals and different impacts in our cities. So this will be the thing that we are going to choose to focus on, And perhaps what will come out is that, as always, things are quite complex in reality, and there is not a clear model that is winning in the sense that is outperforming all the other models, but perhaps in your cities you should think about a combination of different services, trying to make them work at best among themselves and also with the other cities. So in your transport planning activities, I think it's very important to embed car sharing rather than considering car sharing something that is far apart, because otherwise you could end up with problems concerning the fact that perhaps car sharing is not successful in lowering car ownership. We have seen that this is an issue also nowadays in eastern cities. There are high car ownership rates, and in order to address that with car sharing, perhaps a combination of different systems is best. So that's all I wanted to tell you, and just try to convince you to stay with us a little bit longer in the coming months and year. The project will run 1 more year, and we will have an innovation camp, so not a webinar, but a meeting, a physical meeting next autumn, in which you are invited to participate. I think there will be also some possibilities to reimburse some travel. The partner that is in charge of this is right now organizing the issues, so the date and venues will be fixed quite soon, and we all receive notice about that. You are warmly interested in participating, especially if you have found this webinar interesting. So that's all from my side. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marco, very much for this couple of final words. So I would just like to thank you, everybody, for participating. We are maybe 1 minute later. We started at 10:34, but I hope that you also had a great journey here on learning more about car sharing. Big thank you to our Uptake series for being engaged and active today. Thanks to my colleagues who presented, and thanks to colleagues from sister projects who also participated here today. I wish you all have a nice week, and hopefully we will all see you in our second webinar after summer. And as Marco Diana said, in our innovation camp. This will be communicated a bit later, especially with new engagement opportunities for our Uptake series. So thank you very much. The recording will follow directly in your email today. And that's it. We're open for questions in case you have any. Write us an email. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice week.
Bye.